We start with the Fox News alert from Egypt and the very future of that nation. Security forces have been cracking down. It's the deadliest show of force since that country was rocked by revolution more than 2 years ago. There are now reports of nearly 80 people killed in those vicious street battles. And makeshift hospitals have been overwhelmed, with about 800 people so far wounded in both Cairo and Alexandria. And good morning on this Sunday morning. I'm Eric Shawn, and welcome to America's News Headquarters.
Now, we've been watching the situation for a couple of days. Hard to believe how bad it's gotten. I'm Jamie Colby, and it is great to have you here this morning. Secretary of State John Kerry is calling this a, quote, pivotal moment for Egypt, as the new military-backed government is clashing with supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi. Secretary Kerry is urging Egyptian leaders to act immediately to help their country take a step back from the brink. Connor Powell is live from our Mideast Bureau with the very latest. Connor, tell us more.
Well, Jamie, there's been calls to have an inquiry investigation into Saturday's violence, but those aren't likely to do much to sort of calm tensions in Egypt right now, which really do appear to be getting worse and worse. Now, in an effort to clear out the Muslim Brotherhood from the streets and end their nationwide protests in support of now deposed former President Mohamed Morsi, the Egyptian military opened fire on peaceful demonstrations yesterday, killing at least 70 people, wounding hundreds more. Egypt's top military commander, General al-Sisi, issued a warning this week, calling on supporters to take to the streets Friday to, quote, give him a mandate to fight terrorism. That statement is widely understood to be a request to crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, this is the second time the Egyptian military has used deadly force to try to clear out pro-Morsi supporters, which so far really has failed. Now, despite the bloodshed, the Muslim Brotherhood, however, continues to reject calls to end its demonstrations. They continue to hold large rallies in Cairo and other cities like Alexandria. And the violence is really beginning to divide the pro-military transitional government, which has both secular Egyptians and liberal Egyptians and some very Islamic groups as part of this transitional government. Several members of this transitional coalition are voicing concerns about the coalition. And Jamie, keep in mind, one of the foundations of the sort of justifications for this military coup to remove Morsi was to provide stability and to end the political crisis that has really sort of plagued Egypt for the last month or so. It really doesn't appear to be doing that. In fact, it seems to be making things much worse in Egypt right now, Jamie.
It's a great reminder, though, of what it was supposed to do. Thanks so much, Connor Powell, live in our Mideast Bureau. Connor.
So will Egypt come apart, or will the deadly crackdown spell doom for the Islamists and the Muslim Brotherhood? But with their calls for more protests, will the violence only embolden them and their supporters? John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and Fox News contributor, joins us now, as he does every Sunday about this time. Good morning, Ambassador.
Good morning, Eric. Glad to be with you.
Well, as Connor Powell just reported, it seems to be getting worse. What does that mean?
Well, I think you have to ask the question, who's causing the confrontation? Who is making the circumstances where this kind of bloodshed can occur? And while the temptation may be, as it is for some people, always to blame the military, I think you have to be a little more realistic here and understand that what the Muslim Brotherhood is trying to do is increase its arguments about the legitimacy of the Morsi government by creating some martyrs. They are very cynical in the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood. They know people will be killed and wounded. They think it's to their advantage. And to the extent the Western press buys the argument that all of the bloodshed and all of the responsibility is the police and the military, the Muslim Brotherhood is winning again.
So what do we do about that, and how do we achieve some sense of peace eventually there? Or is that possible at all?
Well, you know, Egypt has been through this before. In 1981, the Muslim Brotherhood assassinated President Anwar Sadat, and they killed him and almost killed his successor, Hosni Mubarak, because Sadat had negotiated the Camp David peace agreement with Israel. When Mubarak took over as Sadat's successor, he repressed the Muslim Brotherhood, and it was bloody. So there are people in the Egyptian military who know how this is done and are probably quite prepared to go through it again. The fact is the Brotherhood was engaged in a creeping coup. It was determined not to relinquish power, and that's why millions of other civilian Egyptians went into the streets in June and early July. This clash that we're seeing in the streets is not something caused by the military, maybe exacerbated by its tactics, but it's a reflection of the deep divide within Egyptian society.
And can that divide ever be fixed, or do you see this continuing and the Muslim Brotherhood potentially banned again as it was under Mubarak?
Well, I think that may be what the military does. I think you've got to try and separate the Brotherhood's leadership from the mass of people who voted for Brotherhood candidates. If we simply move again toward elections, as happened 2 years ago, we're going to get exactly the same result. Because conditions in Egypt are not ripe for what we call properly a democratic or better put, a free and open society. So I think the military here has made a decision. I think they knew that they were in for this kind of provocation and bloodshed. They should probably do a better job of restraining some of their people. But don't think this is going to stop, because the Brotherhood's determined to keep it going.
Well, this is not going to stop, sadly, with all the violence there. There are peace talks now set to begin this week between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And breaking just now, Israel has agreed for a prisoner swap with 104 prisoners. What is the prospect of these peace talks potentially achieving anything?
I think the prospect is almost nil. I think that Netanyahu has calculated that it's better for him to accede to the Obama administration's evident desire to get these talks moving again, probably because Netanyahu believes the talks are doomed to fail, given the weaknesses of the Palestinian leadership, so that while there are risks to him, for example, in this release of the Palestinian prisoners that Israel's been holding, he thinks it's better for him to allow the administration to, quote-unquote, succeed in getting the talks getting them going, and then pin the blame on the Palestinians when they fail, as I think they inevitably will.
See, we've seen this movie before. I mean, what do we do about this?
Well, I think Netanyahu has his eye on the bigger picture, which honestly is where the United States' eye ought to be as well, and that's the Iranian nuclear weapons program. I think Netanyahu wants to clear the decks in his relationship with the Obama administration against the day when Israel may have to decide to take military action against the Iranian nuclear program. And I think if that day comes, Netanyahu wants to be able to say to Obama, I did everything you asked me to do on the Israeli-Palestinian situation, even at great political risk. Now, I need you in the United States to stand with me and Israel in the attack against Iran's nuclear program.
And, Ambassador, if we do indeed get to that point and Prime Minister Netanyahu has that type of conversation with the President of the United States, do you feel that the President of the United States will stand with Israel at that point?
I don't know. If I were Netanyahu, I wouldn't have the conversation until after the Israeli Air Force was over targets in Iran, so I wouldn't be asking permission. I'd be telling the president what had happened. That's what Israel did in 2007 when they bombed that North Korean reactor being built in Syria. And I think at that point, Congress is going to need to make itself heard, very supportive of Israel, and I think then Obama would probably go along. But I don't believe that's his instinct.
And finally, do you think this potentially is how it could play out with Iran?
Yes, I think Israel has very little time left to make a decision. It's a very difficult decision to make, but twice before, Israel has struck nuclear weapons programs in hostile neighboring states.
Ambassador John Bolton, always a pleasure. Thank you for your analysis and insight, of course, on Sundays.
Thank you, Eric.
Of course. Thank you.